Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to another deep dive.
Hey there.
We've got a stack of really interesting trending posts, the stuff buzzing around online.
Yeah, we've sifted through quite a bit.
And our mission today is basically to give you the shortcut, the key insights hiding behind the headlines from yesterday and today.
Exactly. We picked out 12 posts, covers a lot of ground tech, policy, markets, even some personal well-being stuff.
All selected to give you some real context.
Right, trying to keep it balanced, constructive. You should get some aha moments out of this, hopefully. A clearer picture.
All right, let's jump in. First up, big economic policy shifts playing out online. We've got a post from @Elon Musk. Just an emoji, actually.
Yeah, just the thinking face emoji. But it says a lot, doesn't it?
It does. What's he reacting to?
So this was his response to someone asking about that big Senate bill, the one that just passed yesterday, July 1st. Super close vote.
Right.
And what's interesting is the data coming out. Yale Budget Lab, they put out numbers showing this bill could actually cut incomes for the bottom 20% by like $700 a year.
Ouch.
Yeah. While the top 20%, they might see a boost of almost $5,700. So it kind of challenges that idea that it's good for everyone. Plus, it's projected to add, get this, $3.3 trillion to the deficit. Kind of reminds you of those old warnings like Calvin Coolidge saying, just kill bad bills.
It's interesting coming from Musk, though. He's usually so focused on tech, right? Although his companies, Tesla, SpaceX,
Yeah.
they've definitely benefited from government support.
Oh, absolutely. That LA Times investigation found they got something like $4.9 billion in subsidies since 2015.
So does that make his emoji reaction a bit complicated? Or is it just how these things work?
That's a great point. It's definitely nuanced, isn't it? I mean, tech companies often talk free markets, but they're, deeply involved in policy. They use incentives. So maybe his critique isn't about all government spending, but maybe about this specific kind of spending. Or maybe the deficit impact. It's complex. That dance between innovation, government help, and, company interests.
Yeah, definitely a dance. Okay, let's get another angle on economic policy. This one's from @JD Vance, the vice president.
Right.
He tweeted, massive tax cuts, especially no tax on tips and overtime. And most importantly, big money for border security. This is a big win for the American people.
So this really signals a major policy direction, a clear focus for the administration. But when you dig into the numbers, like from the Tax Foundation, their analysis suggests exempting tips only really helps about 2.5% of tipped workers.
Don't be that low.
Yeah, and the overtime exemption, maybe 55% of those eligible, so it's not quite universal.
Okay.
And then there's the cost. This policy is linked to a $5 trillion deficit increase that raises flags about, potentially widening income inequality, maybe straining state budgets too, makes that big win for the American people narrative a bit more debatable.
Right. So both these posts, Musk's reaction and Vance's tweet, they point towards, well, a lot more debt, right? What's the bottom line for the national debt picture here?
Yeah, that's the inescapable takeaway, isn't it? Regardless of who benefits from which policy, the pattern is just massive deficit spending. It definitely suggests we're accelerating towards, well, a bigger national debt problem. That creates long-term fiscal headaches, right? Could affect stability down the road, force tough choices about spending or taxes later on. It's kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of these economic talks.
Right, a fundamental issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so from the big picture macro stuff, let's zoom into how policies and maybe even philosophies affect individuals, starting with healthcare. A post from @UranonCentral.
Yeah, this one really highlights a stark difference between healthcare systems. The post claims 326,000 Americans go bankrupt each year because of medical bills.
Wow.
And contrast that with countries like Canada or Sweden saying they have 0 cases. Now, a 2019 study actually put the U.S. number even higher, maybe over 500,000 families facing medical bankruptcy.
That's staggering.
It is. And when you compare spending and outcomes, the U.S. spends way more per person, like $13,432 compared to Canada's $7,013. But life expectancy, it's 77 here versus 83 in Canada, according to recent OECD data.
So we spend more, potentially get less, and face financial ruin from getting sick.
That's the picture this post paints, a real systemic contrast.
But hang on, I've heard the other side too, that in places with universal care, sure, maybe no bankruptcy, but you might wait ages for treatment, right? And that can be dangerous too. How do you weigh that? Financial ruin versus potentially life-threatening delays.
That is absolutely the core tension. It's a really valid point. Critics do argue the zero bankruptcy claim might hide other problems, like people dying because care was delayed. There was a British medical journal study back in 2018 suggesting a link between NHS wait times in the UK and increased mortality.
Okay.
So yeah, it really forces this difficult question. How do you balance efficiency and speed with comprehensive, accessible care for everyone? It's about trade-offs. Different systems make different choices. No easy answers.
Definitely not. Okay, shifting gears a bit to personal philosophy. We saw at Jiang Inspires share advice from Naval Ravikant, saying this is the way. Seems very stoic.
Yeah, it taps into that. Ravikant talks about disciplined habits, fasting, meditation, and there's science to back some of it up. A study in Frontiers in Psychology showed practices like meditation can cut stress by like 30% in high-pressure jobs.
Interesting.
And his advice to avoid debt, avoid addiction, that echoes way back, you know? Think about debtors' prisons in Germany centuries ago. It's a timeless struggle, really. But then there's the victory is assured part. That optimism? Well, it bumps up against current reality a bit. A WHO report from 2023 says 1 in 8 people globally have mental health challenges.
So personal discipline isn't always enough.
It suggests that, yeah, while personal habits are super important, maybe they alone can't fix everything if there are big systemic pressures, you know, economic stress, societal issues that are also weighing people down. Individual strength matters, but so does the system around you.
Got it. It's about both individual responsibility and the bigger picture.
Precisely. Understanding where individual control maybe ends and broader societal factors take over. Personal discipline is empowering, no doubt, but it exists within a larger ecosystem.
Okay, let's connect some threads now on a really hot topic. Immigration, border security. Specifically, this controversial new facility. A post from @Atrupar caught my eye.
Right. Atrupar shared that Fox News chyron image from yesterday, July 1st. It showed Trump talking about this plan called Alligator Alcatraz.
Alligator Alcatraz, seriously.
In the Florida Everglades, and it seems to be tied to a real proposal from Florida officials using an old airstrip that happens to be surrounded by alligator.
Okay, wow.
Unsurprisingly, it's caused a huge outcry. Environmental groups, immigrant rights groups, The Guardian covered the backlash. They're raising serious human rights and ecological flags. Policy-wise, it lines up with that White House executive order from back in January emphasizing really strict enforcement. And the cost mentioned on the chyron, $450 million a year. But importantly, there's no, peer-reviewed economic analysis backing that number up yet. Raises questions about transparency.
Definitely raises questions. Fiscal, human rights. How does this kind of proposal fit into the history of how we talk about and deal with border issues?
Well, it certainly fits a pattern of using, let's say, provocative rhetoric around border security. But the specifics here, the location, that alligators, that's pretty unique and ramps up the humanitarian concerns. Interestingly, some past studies, like one from 2021, suggested that harsher policies don't always deter migration. Sometimes they just push people towards more dangerous routes, potentially increasing illegal crossings.
So it could be counterproductive.
Potentially, yeah. This Alligator Alcatraz idea, if it actually happens, would really push the envelope compared to past facilities.
And related to that, we also saw Benny Johnson posting about how fast it was built.
Right. He tweeted something like, "I don't think anyone realizes how impressive Alligator Alcatraz is. The state of Florida built this 3,000-bed federal prison in 8 days.
8 days.
Yeah, emphasizing Florida's rapid response under Governor DeSantis. The whole setup is designed for speed, quick deportations. There's even talk of deputizing the National Guard as deportation judges, which, if approved, could make it the most, efficient deportation center ever."
Efficient,
Okay.
but controversial.
Extremely. Despite protests from environmental groups, local activists, Native American tribes, Florida officials pushed ahead, prioritizing that logistical speed over those other concerns. And it all connects back to policy changes, like reinstating the Remain in Mexico protocols in 2025, which did drastically cut asylum claims before.
So here we have this really stark tension, don't we? This stated goal of efficiency clashing head-on with these major humanitarian concerns. When you see that kind of clash, what's the first thing that jumps out?
It just immediately throws that ethical tightrope into sharp relief, you know? The push for practical, fast solutions often runs right up against fundamental human rights and ethical questions.
Right.
The speed of construction is, maybe impressive technically, but it completely sidesteps the core objections about how people are treated, the environmental cost. It's a tension we see everywhere today, isn't it? Where the how gets debated just as much as the what.
Absolutely. Okay, let's pivot now. Shifting to the digital economy, the workforce. Some big moves happening there.
Definitely. Big news reported by @WatcherGuru in the crypto world. The SEC gave the green light for the grayscale digital large cap fund to convert into an ETF.
An ETF, so easier for regular investors to buy in.
Exactly, an exchange-traded fund.
Yeah.
And it holds major cryptos, Bitcoin, Ether, XRP, Solana, ADA. This is a pretty big shift for the SEC. They've historically been very cautious.
What changed?
Could be political winds shifting. Remember, President Trump proposed a U.S. crypto reserve with these same assets back in March? CoinDesk reported on that.
Huh?
And it also kind of aligns with Fed Chair Powell talking about stablecoin frameworks back in April. Suggests regulators are maybe getting more comfortable, or at least feeling pressure to get comfortable. We don't have studies on this ETF's impact yet, but when the first Bitcoin ETFs launched, prices jumped like 20% in a month. So could mean some short-term volatility.
That's a massive step for crypto becoming more mainstream, isn't it?
Yeah.
What does it signal about big financial institutions getting involved? Are they finally jumping in?
Oh, for sure. This ETF approval is a huge signal for broader institutional acceptance. You see things like Deutsche Bank planning a crypto custody service for 2026.
Right.
That clearly shows growing confidence from traditional finance giants. It really challenges that old idea that Wall Street would just reject crypto. Instead, we're seeing integration. It opens up crypto to way more traditional investors, kind of a coming-of-age moment for crypto as a serious asset class.
Okay, interesting. Now, another economic forecast, this one from @Unusual Whales, they quoted a Bloomberg piece.
Yeah. The quote was, "The golden age for employers is ending, and business will have to adjust to a world in which immigrants are much rarer and jobs are harder to fill."
So a potential labor crunch.
That's the idea. It's referencing a Bloomberg article from late June talking about global labor markets tightening up, partly because of rising anti-immigration sentiment in many places. Like 67% of Brits think immigration is too high. Now, research, like from the Migration Observatory, suggests immigration's effect on overall wages is usually pretty small, though it varies depending on the industry.
Okay.
But here's a counterpoint from U.S. data. The Chamber of Commerce pointed out recently that labor force participation among prime-age workers is actually at a 20-year high, 83.6%.
Oh, wow. So maybe the domestic workforce can pick up the slack.
It suggests it might mitigate some of those feared shortages, yeah. It challenges that narrative that a labor crisis is inevitable just because immigration patterns might be changing.
So for you listening, navigating your career, what does this potential shift mean? More power to the workers.
It could mean exactly that, potentially. If labor does get tighter in certain sectors, especially those that relied heavily on immigrant labor, you could see wages get pushed up. It might also force employers to, invest more in training people already here or really rethink their pay and benefits to attract talent. So yeah, maybe the golden age for employers is fading, but it could mean a better negotiating climate for employees in some fields, assuming that domestic labor supply holds up.
Interesting times ahead for the job market.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch focus again, moving from these big economic forces to the stuff we buy and see every day. Brands, products.
Right. And at Leading Report and shared some news from the candy aisle, Hershey's announced they're dropping all artificial dyes from their snacks by 2027.
All of them by 2027.
Yep. It lines up with this broader U.S. health push led by HHS Secretary RFK Jr. Follows things like that California review back in 2021 that linked some dyes, like Rednum 40, to hyperactivity in some kids. Though, gotta say, the scientific evidence on that link is still debated, not totally conclusive for everyone. The 2-year timeline. It shows it's not easy for companies to change recipes. We've seen similar promises from Nestle, Conagra, but there's also some skepticism, right? People have been debating dye safety for decades. There was that UK study in the 90s linking Rednum 3 to cancer in animals, though that was later disputed too, so why now?
Exactly. Is it really new science driving this, or is it more about responding to cultural trends that make America healthy again, movement mentioned in the source?
I think it's probably a mix, but that cultural shift and actual regulation seem like huge drivers right now. This Hershey's move happens alongside state bans, California banning Rednum 3 by 2027, for example.
The regulations are key.
Yeah. So while science is part of the conversation, it's really consumer pressure and these state-level rules boosted by movements like Make America Healthy Again that are likely forcing the industry's hand. It makes companies want to show they're listening to public concerns, maybe get ahead of more bans. It's often that public mood and regulation combo that speeds things up more than just new studies.
Makes sense. Okay, sticking with brands, but this one's pretty funny. A post from @Greg 16676935420 that just asks, I didn't even know Lululemon sells hot dogs. What is going on there?
Slight chuckle. Yeah, that one's great. It's pure meme gold playing on that Lululemon lawsuit against Costco.
Okay, I heard about a lawsuit, but hot dogs.
Exactly. Greg's tweet is a hilarious nod to Costco's legendary $1.50 hot dog and soda combo. Price hasn't changed since 1984, and apparently a Statista survey found it's a major reason almost 70% of people shop there. It's a whole thing.
A cultural icon, the Costco hot dog.
Totally. So the joke, the confusion, comes because the real lawsuit isn't about food at all. It's about Costco allegedly selling cheaper knockoffs of Lululemon's expensive activewear.
Okay, that makes way more sense. So no Lululemon yoga pants paired with a glizzy.
Chuckles. Not yet. Anyway, but it really highlights this clash of brand identities, doesn't it? Lululemon, super premium, $8 billion in revenue. Costco, all about value, $242 billion in revenue. Just totally different worlds colliding.
But does suing Costco actually work for Lululemon? Or could it backfire?
That's the really interesting part. There's actual marketing research, like studies published in the Journal of Marketing, suggesting these kinds of lawsuits against discount rivals can totally backfire.
How so?
By suing, the premium brand draws a ton of attention to the fact that, hey, there are much cheaper alternatives out there. It can inadvertently boost awareness and even sales for the competitor they're trying to shut down. Classic Streisand effect, but for branding.
Wow. Be careful what you sue for, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, we have covered a ton today. Let's wrap things up with two final posts. One looking at a major government shift, and one just fascinating insight into our brains.
All right. First, at NWokeness shared a video clip. It showed Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer sounding pretty concerned.
About what?
About the Trump administration's moves regarding USAID, that's the U.S. Agency for International Development. Schumer was suggesting that closing USAID headquarters to staff might just be the start, potentially signaling a broader plan to target other government agencies too.
Okay, what's the context here? What happened with USAID?
So this is happening under the influence of that proposed Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, pushed by Elon Musk. Yes, the name definitely got attention.
EGE, right.
Under that initiative, USAID's global workforce has been drastically cut, from over 10,000 people down to just 294. The plan is apparently to merge what's left into the State Department. USAID was officially shut down as a standalone agency on July 1st.
10,000 down to under 300, that's huge.
Massive. And it's drawn criticism from former presidents, Obama and Bush included, who worry it could really damage U.S. humanitarian work and even security efforts abroad.
That's a fundamental change to U.S. foreign aid policy. What are the ripple effects globally? What does this tell us about this administration's view of foreign policy?
For listeners tracking international relations, this basically signals a major shift in American soft power. USA was always a primary channel for aid, development projects, even counter-extremism work through non-military means. Folding it into the State Department suggests a more centralized approach, maybe less independent, potentially prioritizing direct diplomacy over that specialized development work. It definitely raises big questions about the future of U.S. leadership in global development humanitarian response. Can a merged agency really replicate USAID's specific expertise and reach? It's a big unknown.
A lot to watch there. Okay, final post. Let's end on something just really interesting about how we work. From @DudesPostingUWs.
Yeah, this one's fascinating. It's a video from a University of Central Florida study. It shows a student diagnosed with ADHD. First, they're watching a math video lesson.
Okay.
And the student is, fidgeting, looking restless, clearly distracted. Then the video switches to a clip from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Complete change. The student becomes totally absorbed, still focused. It's a really stark visual difference.
Wow. What does the research say about that?
So the UCF research, published in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology, actually suggests that for kids with ADHD, allowing movement during thinking tasks can be beneficial. And the video difference. It likely ties into dopamine regulation, which is often implicated in ADHD.
Dopamine.
Yeah. Highly stimulating, engaging content like Star Wars for this student can trigger a dopamine release in the brain, which helps improve focus. Less engaging tasks, like maybe that math video, don't provide the same neurological reward, making focus harder to maintain.
That's incredible. It totally flips the script on how we usually think about managing ADHD, right? Usually it's about trying to reduce hyperactivity.
Exactly. It challenges that whole paradigm. What's fascinating here is how much the content itself matters for attention and focus. It suggests that maybe the key isn't always forcing stillness, but finding the right kind of engaging stimulation that helps the brain regulate itself.
So what looks like a distraction might actually be a route to focus if the stimulus is right.
That seems to be the implication. It's about harnessing that need for stimulation, not just suppressing it. A really thought-provoking finding.
Wow. Okay, we have definitely unpacked a lot today, from complex tax bills and healthcare debates to Star Wars helping with focus and the weird world of brand lawsuits.
It really shows how tangled everything is, doesn't it? All these different posts seemingly separate, but they connect in surprising ways. There's so much context bubbling just below the surface online. Hopefully we helped you connect a few of those dots.
Yeah, giving you those aha moments.
That's the goal, helping you see the deeper layers.
So here's a final thought as you go about your day. Think about those quick posts you scroll past. How many of them are just the tiny tip of a massive iceberg? What other simple updates or funny memes might actually be hiding really complex stories about economics, policy, science, just waiting for someone to ask, wait, what's really going on here?
Yeah, what's the story behind the story? Always worth asking.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you feel a bit more plugged in, a bit more ready to spot those hidden insights yourself.
Until next time.
See you next time.